This is a presentation on writing an ELA formative assessment. And what I chose to do a screencast over top of it is because I wanted to elaborate on some of the pages. So writing an ELA formative assessment, the first thing you're always going to do is access your overview chart. Within every unit, you will find several standards that are addressed. So you just want to focus in on a standard that you want to use for creating a formative assessment. Some things to think about when looking at your overview chart that may help you with the progression of this standard is when you look at the final AP prompt. This is going to be the most important because this is where you need to be by the end of the unit. This is what will be assessed. Something else to think about is the assignment. There are some assignments there on the overview chart that could be used as the beginning of creating a formative assessment. I will say that these should probably be elaborated on. After I've accessed my overview chart, I've identified the standard I want to use to create my formative assessment. You definitely want to go to your Common Core state standards to look and review what is expected of students. You can not only use your booklet, the Common Core lesson book, but there's also a link that's connected to the ELA standards within Schoology materials. Within this standard, we want to remember with every standard, there's always an evidence of proficiency that is connected to it that will be tested on SBAC. So in grades 3, 4, and 5, when you look on SharePoint, you will find an evidence of proficiency connected to a standard and each standard. So I say this because this may be one way in which you create an assessment. If you notice here, this is an excerpt from SharePoint. Here is your evidence of proficiency, and these are the questions that may be asked from the evidence of proficiency on SBAC. So that's just something to think about. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you where to find those question stems from the evidence of proficiency. So as always, when you're going to SharePoint, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to click on curriculum and instruction, pick your grade level. After I've chosen the grade level I'll be working with, I'm going to pick my grade page and then the unit I'll be using. Then when you scroll down, if you click on the questions, any of them, you will find the evidence of proficiency on the left and the type of question on the right. So that's where you're going to find those evidence of proficiency questions and stems. It's important when creating a formative assessment to kind of keep these in mind to make sure that you are pushing the standards so that students are able to address these when it gets to the common assessment. So what else could be helpful when creating a formative assessment? You have one resource in your room, the Common Core lesson book, K-5, but then you may decide to use a different resource, like a graphic organizer or some type of activity or project. One thing I will say when you're looking at any graphic organizer or activity, you want to remind yourself to go back and look at the standard and the lesson essential question. What is expected of the students by the end of the unit? You want to make sure whatever you're doing is addressing how the students will be assessed. So this might be also a great time when you're looking at those resources to look at the evidence of proficiency. Am I pushing the students enough to get to where they need to be? So when we are looking at this Common Core lesson plan book, I want you to kind of follow these steps. The first thing you do is you'd always identify the standard. This is what you're going to use to create your formative assessment. And then after you've chosen your standard, you want to go into the Owaki book or the Common Core lesson book and identify that anchor standard. You're always going to have the anchor at the top, and then this is going to be the progression. Some things to keep in mind when looking at the progression is that from grade level to grade level, some of the vocabulary may change. A word that's used in third grade may not be used in fourth grade. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct terminology when talking with students in class. The other thing to think about is that you want to think about where the student's supposed to be by the end of your grade. After I've done those two things, then I'm going to kind of dig deep into that anchor. And within each anchor, you'll most likely find a graphic organizer that is level to your grade. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct graphic organizer that will address your standard and the progression. The other thing you'll find is the independent application. This is going to be a set of activities that may be used to create your formative assessment. But once again, you always want to make sure, does this fit what the standard is asking of my students? So what are we going to do with this? Once you have created your formative assessment, you want to collaborate with your team. You want to first decide how you're going to give the assessment and when you're going to give the assessment. Something that's really important prior to giving the assessment is thinking about the expectations. What is expected of students by the end or once they've completed this assessment? Once you've done that and you've looked at, given the assessment, you want to look at the results of the formative assessment and you want to create a plan of action. Is this something that all of your students did well on? Is it something that you'll need to reteach? Do you need to do this in small group? Are there only a few students? So you want to think about those results and create some type of plan of action. So this is where we are moving with formative assessment.